how specifically will residuals work now under the new writers agreement? And now obviously residuals were one of the big important issues in the writer strike that was going on. Now, of course, it was a very complicated issue because the way residuals used to work just doesn't apply anymore. Streaming is a completely different thing, and you can't just take the old models of residuals and just say, we'll just apply that to streaming. Doesn't work that way. And thus it became a really hard, contentious thing that the Writers Guild and studios had to go back and forth on and come up with something that resembled, I would say resembles residuals. I'd love to hear your take on this, Chris, because it's a little weird. But so how are these residuals going to work? Well, here's basically how this whole thing is going to work. Not everybody's going to get residuals, number one. So only writers who do shows that are ridiculously successful are going to be qualified to get a piece of the residual pie. So here's how it's going to work. All right. If a show gets enough views in the first 90 days that the show has been out, that equals to 20% of that streaming network's total domestic subscriber base, then those people will be entitled, the writers of those shows will be entitled to 50% of what a flat residual rate is called. Really? This is the thing. And Chris, I'm going to say something. I'm going to want to know if you agree with this a little bit later or not.
Okay.
They're calling it a residual. It's really not a residual. It's a bonus. It's really put up like a bonus. You know, we weren't planning on doing this. Jonathan, just give me a quick second to bring this up. But I think it's important for us to get into the classroom on this. And I should have thought of this a little bit earlier. But so again, it's not everybody who's going to get this. Okay. So residuals. Okay. So let me just clear this off first before we get going. It's not everybody who gets it. So if you work on a show, and I think we can go there now. If you work on a show, the average writer on the average show is not going to get residuals. They're just not. So here's how this is going to work. And I don't know why that didn't, want to refresh that. It's not, there we go. So, okay. So let me just put it into typing here what we said before. If a show gets views that are equal to 20% of a streamer's domestic subscriber base, then they will be qualified to get a residual. So, for example, let's take something like, I think Max has 50 million domestic subscribers, okay? 20% of 50 million is 10 million. So, if a show gets 10 million views in the first 90 days, not after that, it can't be 10 million views over the course of a year or anything like that. It has to be within 90 days. Now I'll put that in there. Has to be within 90 days. Okay. In the first 90 days, then the writers of that show and that show only get access to 50% of what is a predetermined but not publicly available knowledge. You haven't let us know, the public know what this number is, but there is a predefined residual for a show that is super successful. And if a show gets 20% of a streamer's domestic subscriber base, then guess what? Hoot and holler, you get 50% of whatever that bonus is. Now, why that 90-day limit is important is because a lot of people have been using the example of Suits lately. Suits have been super popular and nobody's getting any residuals from it. Here's the important thing. Under this new deal, the writers of Suits still wouldn't get anything because all the super popularity of Suits happened years after Suits went off the air. This has to be, if you've got, and I think Netflix has 75 million domestic subscribers. So for a Netflix series, and actually, if one of you guys can do the math of that, what's 20%? Million. What's that?
It's 15.
Okay.
Million.
So for you to get the residual on a Mac show, your show needs to get 10 million views, 20% of all the subscribers. If you're on a Netflix show, that show's got to get 15 million views. So each streamer will have a different threshold for success. Now, this means that a writer who works on 3 different shows in a year, and all those shows end up getting a super impressive number of 9 million views in the first 90 days, that writer doesn't get anything. Well, no, they still get paid at the new increased rate, thanks to the new deal, but they don't get access to that 50% residual. Again, I don't even think it's a residual. It's really a bonus.
Yeah, it sounds like points.
Yeah. It really is more of a bonus, but they're going to call it residual. And to be honest, maybe that's the right way for them to go about it. So if you are a writer on something like Stranger Things, you're good. You're golden. If you are a writer on something like, I'm going to guess House of the Dragon, you're probably good. I don't know what the writers on that, what the numbers on that were overall, but yes, that's going to be the new threshold. Guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of this video, Vessi. Now, like me, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of Vessi, the shoe that claims to be incredibly comfortable and waterproof on top of that. Well, these claims are really interesting to me because as a Canadian who walked around in a lot of snow, and as somebody who likes to go camping and hiking with his wife on the weekends, there's nothing more uncomfortable and horrible than walking around in wet feet. So after receiving my first pair of Vessis and noticing how incredibly good looking the shoes are and how mind-boggling comfortable and flexible they are, the first thing I did was I took them into the backyard to put it to the supreme waterproof test and dipped my feet in my pool. Guys, my feet were bone dry, and like 20 seconds after having them in the pool and I touched them, the shoes themselves were also bone dry. Guys, seriously, these shoes are stupidly comfortable, they look great, and they absolutely lived up to the claim of being waterproof and keeping my feet dry. I absolutely love my Vessi shoes. So guys, if you want shoes that are good looking, are ridiculously comfortable, and on top of all that waterproof, you need to head to vessi.com/Campea and get yourselves a pair today. Go to vessi.com/Campea and get shoes for your best summer yet. Chris, I mean, everybody knew whatever the residual issue was not going to look what it looked like before. It's going to be some kind of a new model. Obviously, and the WGA leadership said, obviously, this isn't what we went in wanting. But it's a lot more than what the studios wanted to give us initially, and we got something here.
Yeah.
What do you think about this for writers? So clearly now, the only writers that are going to get residuals are the ones who work on supremely successful shows. Mm-hmm. And we always thought that once the writers get a deal done, it might set a framework for what the screen actors might get. So number one, what do you think about this definition of residuals and who will get them for the writers? And do you think there's a basis here that the Screen Actors Guild would accept too, or do you think this is too limiting? I don't know. What do you think?
I certainly think the AMPTP is going to use the same model in the negotiations when we come back to the table on October 2nd. I think this will be, well, this is what we presented with the Writers Guild. And, you know, we did a lot of deliberating with them. We know you guys have stood in solidarity with them. So we think this is something that would work for you as well. And I can definitely see the merits of this, right? It does, the changes here do create this kind of pipeline of helping writing be a career. Because before this deal, writers were very much treated like gig workers, even if they were seasoned writers who had hit shows, who had been doing things, just because of the nature of how writers' rooms were being conducted, right? Hey, we're going to kind of try to avoid this writer's room and have a mini room, or hey, you go off on your own and we're only going to pay you for this portion, and then when you come back, you'll get some money here and there. Now, a lot of these like different things that they've come to with the MPTP have made it so more money goes into your initial fee as a writer when you're doing these things. So
they got a 12.5% increase in their rates, which is key.
So we originally asked for, I think, $488 million per year. AMPTP countered with 86. Current deal is sitting at $233 million. So
a compromise right around the middle there.
Yeah. And that first deal was very ambitious. I think the numbers made sense there, but I understand it.
And the studio's first offer was pretty stingy.
It was very stingy. 86. Good Lord. That's what you say to food that isn't around in a restaurant anymore. We're going to 86 the AMPTP. Yeah. So I do like that they are getting more money up front. I do like that they are getting money into healthcare and pension plans and things like that, because that is one of the reasons why historically we've needed residuals, is because we don't get paid well, we don't get healthcare, we don't get these other things up front like other careers and jobs offer you. Right? Even if I go become a gig worker somewhere else, or not even a gig worker, you know, if I had the pleasure of going back into the food service or something like that, I can still qualify and work full time and get health care. I can still qualify and sometimes get stock options or things like that. Like being a barista at Starbucks, you can you can get like really good healthcare and you can invest in stuff. I think actors and writers should probably be afforded the same opportunity. And that's kind of what we have here is now you at least can qualify for healthcare a little easier. And I do like too that they've been making it so even though people may have run out of their qualifying hours for healthcare, that is being taken into consideration moving forward this year. To your point about whether or not it's residuals, it's really not. I think you guys are right. It's points. It's a bonus. But what I like here is that we at least are finally addressing transparency. We at least now are saying we will give you the data. You will see the numbers, and this is when you'll get your return. In a way, it makes me think of when I used to work in sales and how after I met a certain threshold, then I could start getting, bonuses on top
Right.
of that. And that's what this feels like. So it does encourage, quality material. It does encourage that kind of thing.
I think the pro thing here for a lot of the writers is while obviously a minority of the writers are going to, a vast majority of the writers are going to qualify for this residual.
Yeah.
But in the long run, I think it still works to their benefit because would you rather get $12,000 more now or $12,000 paid in residuals over the next 5 years? I'll take my $12,000 now. Thank you.
Yeah.
And with that 12.5%, and remember, these are people who are making like $45,000 a month. And so that 12.5% increase represents a significant, at least let me say, not an insignificant amount of more upfront money that they're going to get that I think more than compensates for what could have maybe trickled in as a residual later on.
Yeah.
So I still think it works out to the writer's benefit, but it's gonna be interesting to see how this really all unfolds over the next 3, 6, 9 years when they're gonna have to come back to the table again to negotiate again once they see how this act. Because in theory this looks good, but is it going to work out in practical terms?
Exactly. And I think the thing here that the WGA did and that I think SAG-AFTRA is doing too is they really won those fights this time around regarding AI. About your own
They
likeness.
had to get that one.
And that was the one that was really, that was
Yes,
Goliath.
they had
here.
to get that
We
one.
had to do that one. And everything else can be discussed later. That was the thing that I personally was just really hoping got settled. And those are the terms of this that I am very, very pleased with.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure you like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget, we have a daily podcast called the John Campea Show podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app of choice. Go and subscribe to it today so it'll be there when you need it.